good.
Go ahead. But the point is, the knowing in the knowing is just simply recognizing, and it's not a question of functioning in that state. It's kind of like, how can you function in any other state? Because you're not, the mind is manifesting as a non-knower. And so it's thinking to know, instead of just knowing. Knowing is a higher frequency, clearly.
So it also seems related to when people speak about lucid dreaming, right? I mean, lucid dreaming is, I know I'm dreaming.
Right, and above
So we're
that
talking
is,
about lucid living.
right, and above lucid dreaming is no dreaming at all.
Conscious dream.
No, there's no, the
Conscious sleep.
dreaming ceases.
Conscious deep sleep.
No sleeping, just awake, knowing. Masters, the masters
Don't
say,
sleep.
masters say they don't sleep.
No sleep.
They're into a meditative state. And I have to tell you, in recent times, more and more I'm not sleeping. I'm closing my eyes, I'm experiencing clear presence, clear light, and I'm resting in there for hours. And I can't sleep. I'm not trying to do anything. It's not sleeping. Dreams aren't starting.
Can people with, let's say, dementia or any other condition recognize this knowing? Or that because their brain is not functioning properly?
I think there's a threshold, psychotic threshold, where it's difficult. Although people who have worked a lot with psychotics say that even psychotics have a island of sanity from moment to moment, and it's at that island of sanity they can be talked to.
Yeah, because I treat a lot of schizophrenics part of medical practice. If they're on the right drug, they're completely rational. You can't tell them.
Yes.
So one could do that with that knowing, non-medicinal way. It's actually a better way because medicines have too many side effects.
Well, in those cases, that I recommend the mindful meditation more than anything else. That's not going to have much significance because the neural programming is just so screwed up that it needs time to reset. So when you're in moments of Rigpa, that kind of resets the whole brain neurology. And the more you practice Togal, once you're experiencing Rigpa, it's reprogramming. It's like there's a reset button in the brain, and it starts to reprogram the whole brain according to that. When you read Longchenpa, the book I brought with his commentary on basic space, you read that book, you'll read through that, and you'll have places that you'll underline and so forth, because when you read them, they caused a change in the neural programming, and you went into Rigpa. It's kind of like the Dzogchen teachings are kind of like a virus, a positive virus, that when entered into our software, deprogram samsara and cause nirvana to become released, just by simply receiving these teachings. It's like entering a virus into the system, which is information. When that information gets into the system, it's too late. It's going to reset.
It means too late for us.
No turning back.
No turning back.
So is knowing Rigpa, actually? Yeah. Knowing is Rigpa.
Knowing that that's your nature is Rigpa. Knowing is like the ground of being, which is what you always are. Knowing and recognizing that you are the ground of being as this pure knowing is Rigpa.
So actually knowing equals recognizing.
Knowing is knowing. Recognizing that this knowing is what you are is Rigpa. So it's the recognition of what you are is Rigpa.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like you look in a mirror and you're seeing your reflection and you go, oh, that's me. The oh, that's me, that's the Rigpa. They're just looking at the reflection, not quite sure who that is in there. That's just the ground of being. The moment it goes, oh, that's me, that's the Rigpa.
But when you say, oh, that's me, that's actually thought in your head.
That's
No?
an analogy.
Okay.
Aware of awareness.
Right. it's a quality of the ground of being to recognize itself.
So knowing could go both ways. Knowing could go exterior, and I could recognize Stephen sitting here as I'm knowing, or I could recognize, stay in that state, knowing state, and recognize self. Like, is that so? Is it bidirectional?
No, those are two different functions.
Mhm.
The knowing, when the knowing is recognizing the knowing, it understands the whole field as being empty, like empty hologram, and all pervasive consciousness. That's the knowing. What you're talking about is more mental functioning,
Mhm.
that Alzheimer's could interrupt and all kinds of things.
Then with that knowing state, does the external stuff attenuate?
The sense of solidification, crystallization of stuff attenuates. Or it doesn't attenuate, you see that it's empty. In Rigpa, which is the condition of the knowing being known by itself, in that condition everything is seen to be empty. Like a dream. It's not a dream, but like a dream. And it's transparent, and it's glimmering, and it's incredibly beautiful just the way exactly it is. When we get this layer of gauze from our eyes away, we see the most incredible beauty of this exactly as it is.
In everyone, including a wicked person.
We're not talking about seeing a person as beautiful. I'm talking about seeing the elements, seeing the skin. I remember some of the first times I really was practicing Togal, and I experienced this super empty clarity. I was with Mattia, and we were in Prater Park, and we had been walking, and we went and I ordered lunch, and we were sitting outside having lunch, and my plate of food came. I think it was some kind of shrimp curry, and the little speckles of some sort of spices he put on the plate. And this was after I had just finished practicing Togal a little while earlier, and I looked at my plate, and everything, the shapes of the way the rice was, the way the seasoning was sprinkled on the edges of the plate, the three-dimensionality of everything, and the colors of everything, it was just like, I was just absolutely enthralled with the incredible beauty of just pieces of rice and the way the sauce kind of flowed down like a river kind of thing, and I'm just looking at this, and it's just so awesomely, incredibly beautiful. And I'm holding my fork like this, and I'm like this, and I remember looking at Mattia, and I go, Mattia, this is just so incredibly beautiful. Remember? Several times I do that. And that's the kind of clarity that occurs after you practice Togal. And in that, there's no inner state of self, there's no solidity of anything, there's just this incredible perceptiveness of absolute rapturous beauty in everything you experience. It's just unbelievable. I remember it was similar in the 1970s when I did some LSD. It was kind of like that, to where but I'd see patterns and things. This, I wasn't seeing any patterns. I was just seeing nakedly exactly how things are. And the paradise we're looking for is right here. It's everything. So it's not like I look at Mattia and see her inner beauty or something like that. I never got that deep. It's just like, wow, look at that shirt, those buttons. I never got beyond the buttons. The beauty was too overwhelming. Like that.
Is
So-
Togal what we did already? Is that, I don't
No,
know what
Togal is, we're going to be
Yet to come.
we're going to be using light sources
I
and
see.
looking at what some
Okay.
people might call eye floaters, things you see,
Okay.
and I'll give you particular gazing techniques to do that. And everybody here is up to that capacity, and we'll do those practices. So if this recognizing that you are simply the knowing is good enough now, and there's nothing more you have to do because you just simply are recognizing the knowing is arising, and anything that's arising in thoughts, stories, feelings, emotions, if those are arising and releasing upon the arising, you're there. That's it. There's nothing more in your practice. That's called non-meditation. You're in the knowing of the knowing, which means there's no center. There's no sense of a me here. Thoughts can still arise, but as they are arising, they're releasing like bubbles coming up in the water, and they hit the surface, pop. Next bubble comes up, pop. No stories are forming. No drama is forming. Any karma. Karma only manifests as thoughts. There's no other karma than our thinking. So karma will always come up as a thought. It's the same as any thought. Actually, every thought is karma. So, because it's a result of conditioning. And so all of these thoughts are arising and releasing because there's no center there that's grabbing anything or getting involved. There's nothing causing any solidification or crystallization. Because if you're just being the knowing of this moment, there's no grasper. There's no resistor. There's just the knowing of what's occurring.
Mm-hmm. I was just reading to Carol's courtesy that there's this dog's gaze and lion's gaze. If you throw a bone or something, the dog will chase the bone, but the lion will catch the guy who's throwing the bone.
Yeah.
So in this case, is it like you are the lion? You become the lion? Or do you throw
No, you're just the knowing. I'm going to get real difficult, okay? No matter what anybody says, I'm going to say, no, you're just the knowing. So if you ask me a question, I'll say, no, you're just the knowing of that. Let it go. Whatever that thought is, whatever your question, just let it go. You're just the knowing of that question. Because I want to push you right into the knowing, just the knowing, just the knowing. I don't want to validate any of this other stuff. Just everything that's arising, everything you experience is empty. That's the whole point of doing these exercises, of seeing every thought is empty. Is there any thought that is made out of wood that's in your consciousness, or metal, or diamond? No, they're all just made of the exact same material that dreams are made of. So no matter what your drama is, your story is, that's significant, my childhood, my traumas, my abuse, it's just empty stories. No interest. It's empty stories, empty, it's all empty. But it's brilliantly vivid emptiness.
So I think, therefore I am. That's all famous sentence on this card. Is that because, so that's, I think, and the thought is empty, therefore I am empty.
What's knowing, that analogy you just gave me? What's knowing, that analogy you just gave me?
Just annoying.
Thank you.
Bingo.
Just notice when a thought is arising, a question is arising, a story is arising, a drama is arising, a vignette in your mind, a daydream is arising. Just recognize the knowing of that. And it just... until that center, which is also an arisings that's crystallized for a moment, until that dissolves, then everything just self-releases by itself. They describe that like a thief breaks into your house, but you don't own anything. There's no chairs, there's no utensils, there's nothing in there. He comes into the house, it's completely empty. He's running all around, he wants to steal some stuff, but there's nothing there. When your mind state is like that, there's nothing, everything is empty. So there's nothing for it to grab onto. There's no self, because we've seen that the mind has seen the self is empty. So there's no crystallization of a me as a center. So when we recognize this plain knowing, that's just knowing, and the mind is remaining in the knowing, simply the knowing, then everything is arising and releasing. And it's all arising and releasing anyway, because everything's impermanent. It may crystallize for just a little bit, but then... So what these masters do, which is interesting, they understand this, exactly what I said. They spend a lot of time in meditation, just simply sitting in presence, or doing toga. They continue their meditation. So in Dzogchen, they say the meditation, you can sit in a posture, you don't have to, but you can sit in a posture, and you're simply resting in the ground of being, which is simply knowing. You're just simply resting as presence. And anything that's arising, whether it's a perception, or whether it's an inner perception of a thought, a story, a feeling, an emotion, a sensation, they just arise and release, arise and release, arise and again. On and on like that. So there's a famous Zen story that I like a lot, because it really brings it to the knowing. Knowing and like perceiving are similar. So the Zen student says to the Zen master, and this is a true story that's been handed down, and I think it was Ta Hui, who was the Zen master. The student says to the master, he says, Master, how can I perceive my Buddha nature? And the master says, you can't perceive your Buddha nature because the perceiving is your Buddha nature. So we could say, Master, how can I know my Buddha nature? The master says, you can't know your Buddha nature because the knowing is your Buddha nature. Yes.
I've listened to you 3 times. I mean, three retreats, and this is the 3rd time I hear you say this about knowing. And I just can share that. This is whatever you have talked about, all the words you have said. This is what has been the most important to me. And it's even more important every time you point to it. I feel there. When it is for me, you can talk about nothing else than this. This is enough. If you let us understand this, then the rest is we don't need
Empty.
it. Yeah, it's empty. We don't need it.
It's empty. And there's no one to need it, because the one who could need it is also empty.
Yeah.
So
You are just this empty knowing, either in recognition that you are just this empty knowing or not.
Yes.
But nonetheless, you are always just this empty knowing, either in recognition, which is a Buddha, or in not recognition, which is a citizen of samsara.
So is there a way to grow into it, like in the beginning, you do 90% of other practices and then 10% knowing, and you slowly...
You are already the knowing. What are you growing into?
No, you don't.
You're already that
Need the
knowing.
gravel.
Nothing to do, nowhere to go.
Then why is not everybody knowing all the time?
Everybody does.
They're the knowing, but they're not recognizing the knowing. That's why you're here. If it was all happening naturally, I wouldn't be here.
We fall
Here
back
we do.
into habitual thinking immediately.
Not we fall back into, the subconscious continues playing, those crystallizations are still occurring. See, there's nobody here doing this. This is all happening on automatic. All of this stuff. It's not like you are causing these thoughts to arise, you are releasing these thoughts, you are realizing. There is no you. If you slow everything down and you just watch in meditation for a couple of hours what's taking place, all there is thoughts. There's a thought about a me, but there's no me other than the thoughts about a me. And there's about a me that wants to do this or a me that wants to do that. It's just a series of thoughts, a little story, a little empty story that's playing. There's no me to do something. There's just thoughts about a me to do something. And all those thoughts are empty. When this really dawns on the mind, that whatever is arising in your mind and has some kind of basis, like, well, I have this question. Well, what just arose in the mind? A series of thoughts that say, well, I have this question. And all of those thoughts are completely empty. There's no substance to those thoughts, and there's no one there to benefit from those thoughts. There may be the thought, well, I could benefit. But those are just thoughts that arose that are empty. I just could benefit. Those thoughts just occurred and arose and dissolved. But there never was an I there other than the thought, I could benefit from this. There's
So the
no
mach-
one there. There's just a stream of thoughts.
So is there a machine like a bubble maker in the subconscious that's pluming all these thoughts? Does that have to be turned silent, turned off before in any way, or that's what the knowing is doing? Is turning off that machine, that subconscious throwing thoughts up in this conscious field.
No, the energy of the knowing is everything you're seeing, including the subconscious, including the human body, and all of it's manifesting according to dependent origination, which is a chain of conditioning that's just happening all on its own spontaneously. It's all spontaneous happening. And there can be all kinds of mechanisms in the brain, there are mechanisms in the thought, in subconscious, and all of that's just happening in the knowing. And it continues to play out. And so whatever is the karmas in this system, in this consciousness, they continue to arise and release until they're finished.
But you were giving good instructions of how to deal with this by just let it go, you know, and,
Yeah.
and reprogram those pathways. If you feel like you have to, you know, get involved or listen to the thought or ask the question, you can say, no, you know,
Let it
that's the
go.
only thing that can, that was what I heard you say.
Yeah.
Just, no, doesn't really matter. That's the only real practice.
That's a remedy when it's not just self-releasing. That's when the sense of a me crystallized in consciousness. Remember, there is no you. There's no personal you. There's only this infinite field with no individuals in it anywhere. And so energies are occurring locally through a body-mind, but there's no me there. Part of the nature of the subconscious, like we know when dreaming, it creates identities, the people we think we are when we're dreaming. And sometimes, while we're awake, it creates an identity, a subconscious identity, that has issues and stories and problems. That's that moment when that entity can apply a remedy, like, okay, I'm just going to be the observer to these thoughts, and I can just let go. So, if this isn't clear to you, which it will not always be clear to you
It
in most
actually
cases,
is.
but it should be clear to you now, that there is no one here, there's just thoughts arising, and when I mean no one, there's no fixed entity called me. It's, if you look at it in your mind, meditate, you're not going to find this me somewhere, you know, sitting over here or somewhere. You're just going to find thoughts about a me.
That goes into physics, doesn't it? We're
Yeah.
all just vibrating
Yeah.
particles,
Well, when we
We're a
say
thought.
we are, we're the knowing.
knowing that.
That's the dynamic energy that's arising from that knowing, all those particles and all of this that you're seeing and hearing, that's what's arising. But that's too theoretical. You have to see this directly. That's why we're going to do these other practices, to be able to do that. But when that crystallization occurs, a transitional thing that can be done, that seems to be being done by a someone, is to just pay no attention to these daydreams. Cut off the daydreams. Cut off the thinking process. If this was more of a beginner's class and you guys weren't doing quite as well as you're doing, I wouldn't be talking like this. I would wait quite a while. I'd wait until the stuff was more empty, that everybody was understanding emptiness, experiencing it, and telling from how we did these meditations, what you're telling me you're experiencing tells me we're right there. You guys are right where you need to be for
Good,
this
'cause I don't
particular
wanna hold
teaching.
up the class.
Good.
Who?
You're not holding anybody up. You're not holding anybody up by any means.
So with the knowing, is there a subsidy, is there a technique, or is just knowing, be that? And this thought, the throwing out these thoughts and bubbles, is that a subsidiary aid to just knowing yourself and be as you are? Or there's no technique to it? Just knowing.
No technique to what?
Knowing.
Knowing is already knowing. It's like,
Okay.
all right, what's the technique of space?
Okay. So there's Togal and knowing, are they brothers or cousins, or what is the nexus?
Togal, when performed through a body-mind organism, transforms all those other energies.
So it's a slightly different technique. It's not directly related or prerequisite for knowing.
It's taking it further. what we're doing now with this direct introduction is acquiring the mind of a Buddha. The knowing, awareness, knowing itself. That's the mind of a Buddha. When we practice Togal, we're realizing the body of the Buddha. That's the light body. It's a body that looks like our body, similar, but it's made up of the chakras. It's a subtle body, and it can appear, disappear, and reach out into all dimensions to liberate citizens of samsara. Togal is to realize the body of a Buddha. What we are realizing in the knowing aspect is the mind of the Buddha. The mind of a Buddha recognizes all of its appearances to be empty. Not non-existent, just to be empty of any permanent nature, and they appear to be transparent and inseparable from that knowing. Like when we practice listening to the sounds, and we can't feel any separation between the sounds and our awareness of the sounds, that's what we're talking about. But it's easy to recognize that identity of the knowing with its experiences, with the integration with sounds. We can't find the sound to be different than that. So then we bring that about through the five senses, all five senses. And the result is that it's recognized that the knowing is all experience. That experience isn't a knower and the experience as the object of the knowing, as the known, but the experience is the knowing of it. So experience is knowing, knowing is experience.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yes.
What if all the five senses are silent? There's no input coming up through any other senses.
Yeah, so
There's still the knowing, and what form will it be then?
kind of like a cow, a brown cow. Or sometimes it's like a goat. In that exact circumstance. Where are you getting this stuff? Knowing is just like empty, clear space that knows.
I mean, we are associating it with like sound,
It doesn't change.
or touch, or the five senses typically. So
Yes.
I was wondering if you were amputee and had no sensation and deaf and mute.
I don't know. I haven't had that experience, so it's. Does that help us? No.
It's a theoretical question.
It's fine. It doesn't help us.
Okay. I withdraw my
Sam,
question.
what I want from you, Sam, gentlemen, what I want from you, Sam, is questions that elevate our state of consciousness. Like it's a profound question, and then when we, look at the answer and it made us look at something, we go.
That requires a profound
Yes.
mind. I don't have that.
Those are the
I'm going to
questions.
disappoint you,
I
unfortunately.
mean, there's a million questions that everybody could ask, like, will my hemorrhoids go away the longer I'm in Rigpa?
I can answer that. No.
Well, I don't think you've given it a fair chance. You were thinking too much about your hemorrhoids and their significance. So that's Trekchö. That's the direct introduction. Then what are you supposed to do? The three principles of Trekchö is direct introduction. The second is remaining free of doubt. How do we remain free of doubts when doubts arise? Like you've received this now, and then maybe a little later, tomorrow, the next day, or maybe in the next 5 minutes, you're going to start to wonder and say, well, is it really that simple, or is it this, or but. What are we doing with these doubts now that are arising? Yes, sir.
We recognize them as empty.
You recognize them as empty. Anyone else have any better idea? Or something that's a little more accurate?
So let them float on by.
No.
No.
What's floating on by?
That's
They're
thought.
empty. They're empty. That's okay what you said, but we're talking about what is the most essential way to deal with a doubt. What is a doubt? Is it a thought
As a
that's occurring in your mind?
Yes.
Yeah,
Is
you're
this
not
is a
sure.
doubt in its own classification and category that's actually made out of wood or stone or something? What's it made out of?
Just a thought.
Empty.
But what is it made out of?
Energy.
Okay, like a dream, right? It's just like a cloud that appears and disappears. It has no core. So a doubt is no more than any other type of thought, marmalade, me, whatever the thought is, it's no different. It's just empty. So recognizing that there's no exceptions, that all thoughts, all stories in our mind, including our sense of self, is empty, resolves every situation. That is the panacea for samsara. That is what the Buddha taught. And if you have any technical questions about what I just shared, bring them up with Sam. Later.
And do exactly the opposite of what I say.
And after doubt, when we can let doubt go, what then?
We don't let doubt go because you're assuming there's something there to let go. And there's someone
Or
there
someone
to let it go.
You see through it then.
Who?
Recognize.
No. Who sees through it?
That which is in doubt.
And what is that? And what is that? What is that which is in doubt?
Nothing.
Well, no, it's a thought of
A
me.
thought?
It's a thought
A
of
thought
me.
having a doubtful thought.
And how is that experienced? Directly.
Uh, well, I guess it's kind of some kind of tension.
Well, it's experienced as a series of thoughts.
Yeah.
It's experienced as a series of thoughts. And all thoughts are intrinsically empty. They don't have to be let go of because they all self-release. And there's no one there. The notion there's someone there to let go of is another thought that's empty. I'm trying to point out to you there's no one there. There's just a stream of thoughts that say there's someone there. And those stream of thoughts are all empty. There is no personal self. There's only thoughts about a personal self and a story about a personal self that's made up 100% of empty thoughts. And if we doubt that, we need to go back and look at the paper and take a meditative moment and look at the nature of our thoughts and see if there's any thought of any kind we can find in our consciousness that is other than empty. When we become convinced that every thought in our consciousness of any style, of any kind, whether a doubt, whether a conviction, whether a belief of any kind whatsoever, that they are all equally empty, then we can notice also that any sense of self, any sense of me, only occurs in our consciousness. It doesn't exist outside of our consciousness over here, and our consciousness is here. So that means it's content in consciousness. And everything that's content in consciousness is thought, the stuff of dreams. And thought and the stuff of dreams are all
Empty.
and therefore it's discovered, so to speak, that there is no self. There's just a stream of thoughts that are empty. And when they're too fast coming together, it's like the movie, the individual frames, giving an impression of there being something there. I can take this thing in the dark, this burning incense thing, and I can whirl it like this, and it looks like there's a fire circle. If I slow it down, the fire circle disappears. If I take your thoughts and slow them down enough, the self will disappear. It requires the rapidity of thoughts in a row that give the sense that there's actually someone there. There isn't anyone there. There's just thoughts about there being a someone here.
And I can shortcut all these steps by being the knowing of whatever appears.
Who would be doing the shortcutting?
No. No one is doing the shortcutting. But instead of doing the of these steps, if you are the knowing, you don't have to do the steps either.
But who would or wouldn't
No.
have to be doing the steps? Which
No, there
which
wouldn't
which
be
entity?
any steps. There
Which-
wouldn't be any steps if
which-
there was anyone there.
Which entity would be doing the realizing the knowing, or would be doing these steps as the alternative? Which entity?
No entity.
There is no entity. There's thoughts about alternative steps and a someone to do those.
But the knowing is not an entity.
This knowing is not an entity.
The know, but how do you? I mean, when we use this language, how you can't say I am the knowing, or you can say that if you mean that
Who
I.
can?
No, I mean if you mean that I.
Who means? There isn't anyone.
No.
No.
I sort of know that.
Who sorts of knows that?
Ay, ay, ay.
I'm not being facetious. I'm being perfectly straight with you.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone here. I do. What's happening is a stream of thoughts that are known, that are knowing.
Yeah.
But there's none that add up to a me.
No.
There's a thought about a me. Sometimes there's a lot of thoughts about a me, but they're all then recognized to be empty and they self-release.
But if you meet someone who knows what you know, the knowing. I mean, if you meet
You and
somebody who
Sam
is
should
in
be
the
a comedy
knowing,
team.
can you talk to him at
You give him
all?
my disease.
Is there anything to talk about? I mean,
No.
Is there a doctor in here?
You can talk.
Nothing
Talking.
to talk
Wait.
about.
Talking could occur about anything. There's
Yeah,
no one controlling
course.
the flow of thoughts or the talking.
No.
There's no controller.
yeah.
There's no manager.
No.
The manager is just a thought of a me. And if we look at this manager and we say, well, I feel like I am the manager. I'm managing my life pretty well. Let's look at this me feeling of being the manager. And what are you ever going to find? Just a bunch of thoughts and stories. Proof. I have memories of how well I've managed my life before I got that promotion. I did that. So let's examine that memory and stuff. In examining that memory, is there anything in that memory that's occurring in your consciousness that is other than empty thoughts about a manager? And is there anything there, is there a manager in here other than thoughts about a manager? There isn't anyone. There's just a flow of thoughts occurring.
And knowing that is
Wisdom. Prajna.
And that's it.
But there is
And
nobody
that's-
to know.
And that's it. He's right. And that's it.
Prajna
yeah,
paramita.
yeah. Oh, right.
That's
That's
it.
what I want.
Prajna paramita. Exactly. That's the wisdom of emptiness. That's the wisdom of emptiness. You are all Buddhas.
Whatever you say, you're going away from it. That's the problem.
What, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. What,
yeah,
Carl?
yeah.
Whoever.
Whatever.
Whoever.
Whatever. No,
Who says?
whatever. Well, yes. But I try to explain. Whatever you say, you are going away
Whatever
from.
who says.
Who goes away?
And who goes away from
Whatever
what?
it said.
And
Now
who
we have
goes away
some
from
new
what?
kind of language
Well,
here.
yes.
I recommend that you remain silent.
You,
I've been there.
you
As his attorney, I'm advising.
You're completely right. But if we have to communicate to explain this,
Yes?
so that's what I used.
He's having a
Well,
foot,
only for communication.
foot
I
in the
know.
mouth disease.
The only
like I
way
have.
is to remain silent.
I understand. You're still owed my good graces, okay? Because you're the one that said empty. You're the one that said empty first. So he's okay. Then somebody should say, who's okay?